Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women Talk Construction. And we're here today with a very special guest. Right, Christy?
Yes. Excited about this one.
I know. We're so lucky, Christy, right, to have all these
Mhm.
different guests on our show that have so many different backgrounds and even how they land into the construction world is so
Yes.
interesting. And we know that our listeners are going to glean a lot of knowledge from our next guest, and her name is Lydia. And she works in her family business, and she is the fourth generation in that business. And y'all know you've heard me talk about that. And that is a rare thing to see a fourth generation. And of course, it excites me to see it. And she is the first female leader in the family. And that's pretty special. So welcome, Lydia, to the show.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Christy. Really appreciate it. Very, very stoked to be here.
Cool. Tell our audience just a brief little bit about yourself before we jump into the questions.
Sure thing. All right. So, quick version is I grew up in Warrenton, Virginia. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, played lacrosse there. And then I did ROTC at the same time, Navy ROTC, commissioned into the Navy, was on warships, did intelligence in the Pentagon. I got out, I got my executive MBA from Wharton, joined the family business, and officially took over full ownership from my dad 2 years ago. So have just hit the ground running since.
Wow. What a great segue into sorry.
Wow.
Some of the things that we want to talk to you about today. One of the things that I really want to talk about, and I think is important to our listeners, is institutional transformation. So you've had a little bit of that since you've been there. My apologies.
Allergy
Allergies.
season, right?
So I'll start that over. He'll cut that out. So you've had a little bit of institutional transformation since you've been there. How have you how have you transitioned decades old family business into a process-driven organizations built for scale?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's there's a complex answer and a simple answer. I'd say you can't build a skyscraper on unsuitable soil, right? That's the
Yes.
analogy I would use. And sometimes an exfill with some excavation and backfill is sufficient. Sometimes you need to go all the way down with like helical piers, right, and screw down to the base there and put it on solid ground. So I did not quite realize until I got deeply into things how deep the soil went. And so it's been a process, and it's not something that happens overnight. I would say that there's also a correct sequencing. Okay, so you can make good decisions in the wrong order, and that could be just as damaging as making the wrong decision from the start. And that's something I had to learn the hard way. Now, I'd say getting a coach helped me finally, expedite that. So you're basically paying for their years of scars and learning, and you're just okay. What's the shortest point from A to B? But one of the simplest structures I've been using is climbing up this people ladder, essentially. So build the people to build the buildings, to build the company, to build where you want to go. And that starts with admin. All right. So we're talking an executive assistant. If you are a CEO or an owner and don't have an executive assistant, that is the first place for you to start, because you're not leveraging your time well if you don't have that. I'd also say the financials would be a part of that. You have got to have a solid foundation, because if you do not, it's like trying to drive a ship without any navigation system, or it's trying to drive your car without any, oil or gas gauges. You need to be confident in those financial numbers. And there's ways to test, hey, is this person the level that I need? But I'd say that's admin. Once you get that structurally sound, then you move on to delivery. For us, that's the general contracting, the actual construction, the production. So we're talking, as far as hires go, superintendents, APMs, and PMs. So that's where you're now investing in more of that high talent there. And once you feel like the actual product that you're delivering clients is very solid, then you can move on to marketing. Do I have enough leads? And then on to sales. Am I closing those leads? So you can very clearly identify where's the bottleneck in your business and where to focus your attention next. And lastly, leadership. So if you've hit all of those rungs, then it's time to buff up the leadership if you really want to scale. I would add one nuance is that leadership needs to cycle down to each one of those other rungs in the ladder. I wouldn't say that rung in the ladder is shored up unless you have a leader at each one of those rungs, not just the function getting completed. You need a leader at each one of those rungs. Otherwise, you're going to be the bottleneck at the top of the business.
Excellent answer. What great leadership advice too.
It's hard fought.
I'm over here taking notes right now.
I was about to say, I know that Christy's taking notes.
I'm
right
totally
now
taking notes right now.
Okay, so when we opened this up, you mentioned you had entered the Navy, and of course, you before that you told us about lacrosse and Navy, and just your insane schedule as a young adult. But let's talk about your naval leadership. Share with our audience lessons in authority from starting a career on an all-male ship. Wow. Really, was it all male? And applying that to the construction industry.
Yeah, you guys, this was wild. Okay, so like I'm commissioning into the Navy. The very next week, I've driven cross country with, my new Ford Explorer that I had like my career starter loan go pay for, right? I check into my first ship. Not only do they tell me that first day, you're going to be the division officer for main propulsion division. So you're in charge of all the gas turbine propulsion that gets you through, the water and all the electrical components that are tied with that. Not only that, I learned that that ship had been all male 2 weeks prior. So I was one of 8 women on a 400-person ship. And they're like, Ensign Miller, you're going to help with the integration of women onto this ship. And like, truthfully, you guys, I didn't know that ships were all male still because they had just recently finished decommissioning frigates, which I knew had all male crews still. Cruisers, I did not know, were still all male crews at the time. Submarines were still all male at that time. I was tracking that, but this was a genuine shock. And also, like, for a little context, I went to an all-girls high school. I have 3. I'm one of 3 girls. Okay. And then I go and play sports at a very high level with a bunch of strong females. Okay. Like that's my life up until this point. And so I had very like limited interaction, honestly, with men. And, but what I found is, number one, like I was the engineering division officer. I didn't pretend to know what I didn't know. I was a political science major in college. Okay. I didn't have engineering background like that. And here I was 23 years old and in charge of people from 17 to in their 40s who've been doing this for decades. And I didn't pretend to know what I didn't know, but you better believe I was down in the engine rooms walking these, fuel oil lines hand over hand, identifying every valve, every gauge with these guys. I was crawling inside gas turbine engines and generators, the module boxes that held them, being like, explain this to me. And so I asked 1,000 questions. And I think the important distinction here is when you ask these questions, it's not like, women to men, don't ask from this like timid, be bold about asking these questions. Own it that you don't know, but you're genuinely curious, because that genuine curiosity, like that's what shows. And your genuine care for the person that you are, you help get them resources as the division officer. You can do that. And so, and at the end of the day, I do think my sports background like drastically helped me, because I had been trained on always refocusing the team on what is the mission here, and accountability. And I think that was highly, highly respected. I'd say for any listeners with daughters too, I have a daughter now, like the number one thing you can do for your daughter is to get them into sports, you guys. Like,
amen.
If you take one thing from this whole conversation, this is what I would say. Take this. Okay. 94% of girls who played high school sports Okay, the people in the C-suite, 94% of those had played high school sports. 52% of the women in C-suite positions had played at the collegiate level. That's not a coincidence, okay? It's the command presence. You're able to, and here's the other thing. It doesn't matter if it's tennis or swimming, fencing, one-on-one sports versus
Golf.
lacrosse. Exactly. Doesn't matter versus lacrosse, soccer, basketball, okay? Because you're still a part of a team. You still have to hit results. There's still a public scoreboard. You have to accept failure publicly multiple times. And you have to defer pain, to be able to win long term. So all of those things I brought to the deck plates of this warship. And guess what? This ship, by the way, also hadn't gone through a full maintenance period in 17 years.
Oh, wow.
That never happens. It's usually every 3 years. But this ship was the test ship down in Hawaii for Missile Defense Agency. So anyways, it was an uphill battle. So we passed all of the engineering certs with flying colors. They actually modeled our training program from that ship across the entire carrier strike group. So we set the model. And then right in time for deployment, they moved me to combat systems division and department because in the shipyards, it's very engineering heavy. On deployment, it's all about the radar weapon system. So then I was in charge of that. But yeah, there a little background on how I bring, how I had to lead on a warship of 400 people in the middle of the ocean for 7 months isolated. How do you handle men and women on that ship during that time? And so I take some of that now to the construction field. You get in the field, see everybody, don't pretend that you know what you don't know. Okay. Like I said, I don't have a construction background necessarily. I grew up in the family business, but I'm a team builder. I'm an operator at the end of the day. I know business now because of business school and being around people in all different types of industries and seeing how they operate.
That's incredible. So we have a lot of high school kids that listen to our podcast. So if you are not in sports, get in one.
Yeah.
Even if you don't love it, right? Like what you're going to gain from being in a sports, on a sports team is so phenomenal. It is not just about playing soccer. It's not just about playing volleyball. It's not just about playing golf and all the other sports that are out there. It's about what you gain for real world knowledge for the rest of your life.
It is.
High school and college. So I love that. I love that advice. I also think that we probably need to point out another thing that you mentioned. You're going to use the tools and resources that you build over all the years. I mean, you can start as early as 6 years old. You have tools and resources that you are learning based on what you're going through and the circumstance. So use those tools and resources to be able to do the unknown, to be able to combat a situation that you've never been in before. And curiosity is so important, especially if you come to it humbly. And not try to act like you know it all. Lydia, that story is so amazing. I'm hating to do this right now because that was so good and we could talk about that for 30 minutes. But I want to talk about technology and what Miller's doing. So we're going to shift just a little bit. Unfortunately, we don't have an hour, but we want to make sure that we're touching on all these things that you're doing phenomenally. How does Miller leverage technology to compete with the $20 to $50 million projects against other GCs, and you only have 22 employees? Tell us how you leverage that.
Yeah. So the takeaway here is every single company is a tech company now. It does not matter what industry you're in.
True.
And you have to embrace that reality. That's just facts. Okay. Anthropic released a study a couple weeks ago now, and it shows a graphic of the potential of AI across all different types of industries, and then what's actually been maximized and implemented so far. And construction is on there amongst many others. And there is potential for construction. The potential is a bit lower, okay, but there's potential for construction. And yet construction is one of the slowest movers to adopt AI. And I've heard a lot of people very fearful, some rightfully placed, of like, if they're bidding government projects, you have to be very conscientious about what you're putting into AI, right?
Right.
But don't let that be an excuse for all the other areas you can use AI to bring efficiency to your business. And all construction companies, they have, office admin, they have a legal component, they have, engineering and architecture. There's so many different other elements, management, middle management within any type of construction company. All of these components have the highest usage potential for AI. And we're still only like a fraction of the way there. And the construction industry is the top 2 slowest industries. Like it's like ground maintenance is the other one. That's the slow one. It's
okay. I didn't know that.
Us and ground maintenance are the slowest 2 industries to adopt AI. And so at Miller Brothers, we seek to have AI as part of 92% of our tasks every day. In the office. And the field has their own aggressive metrics that we are seeking and going after. And was it a little questioned, and was there a little resistance at first? Yes, 100%. But once we started getting use cases and sharing that publicly with the company, that people started to be like, wow, okay, buy into that. Now, do you have to double check everything? Absolutely. Okay. It makes errors. It hallucinates, right? You have to check everything. But the amount of time you buy back with it is insane. And so I'd say it's just been it's a weapon that why wouldn't you use it? And I think for business, how you win is speed oftentimes. Because if I've made a decision today based off AI, instead of waiting a week to do it, or a month, a project that might take a month, then I've been able to make a few different mistakes, make the right decision, and keep moving. By the time, the person over here hasn't been using AI, makes a mistake, and it could still be the wrong mistake, a decision with a mistake. So, we use it in every area of our business, really. We don't put private data in there, but every other area we utilize it.
Yeah,
That's
construction
awesome.
seems to be the slowest.
They do.
For
sure.
all listeners, that's your exact opportunity, right?
Right.
We had another
I think
person on.
and I do think they're trying to use
Yes.
AI. I think you're right, Lydia. Well, I know you're right. There is some hesitancy there, right? For a number of reasons.
Yep.
And sometimes you just got to be brave.
Yeah.
Don't put your private stuff out there. Just like what you said, don't use your private information about your company. No, don't put your financials in there, right? I don't think everybody needs to see that, but thank you.
Yeah. And we're running low on time, so I'm going to ask the last question, and I want to know more about the Miller what you talk about, methodology in utilizing a stage-gated system to create a consistent, surprise-free client experience. Like, I definitely want to hear more about what that looks like for y'all.
Yeah, so the Miller methodology is all about the fact that people aren't just, buying a general contractor.
Right.
You are buying a methodology. You're buying the trust that people can repeat success over and over again. This has been one of the biggest changes, really, is how there was a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of it lived in people's heads. It was being able to pull that out into a repeatable process. And this was one of the biggest skills I learned from the Navy too. But it's broken up into pre-construction, construction, and launch. And you can think about it this way. When you get on a plane from Dulles, in Washington, D.C., and let's just say you fly to San Diego, does it feel like you have 3 different airlines flying you there on takeoff, in air, in landing? Or do you feel like you have one airlines flying you from Dulles to San Diego? It's a smooth, seamless operation. It's one flight. It's part of the whole process because you have one cockpit. You have one, airlines, you have one methodology that they're all working with, right? It's the same idea for a general contracting company. some general contractors might hand you off from each of these stages. But really, like, our goal with this methodology is that you feel like it's one team leading you through this entire process, and you can't even identify the seam. And so the goal with
Nice.
the pre-construction phase is, you know, we don't want you to have any surprises. So let's go through everything. Let's value engineer. And it's, I mean, we're talking about a 9-box step with multiple steps in each one of these. It's 27 boxes total across all 3 methodologies. And you have to go through each gate and checkpoint from pre-construction into construction. Everybody has to buy off and go through this checklist. Like, we're ready to proceed to construction. In construction, it's all about the owner knowing exactly where their project is at any given time, constantly, and not feeling like you have a revolving door of
Right.
team members on
Right.
the project, right?
Yes.
And then lastly, you know, we, Miller Brothers, we really pride ourselves in not just being a general contractor, but we want to be a true construction partner with you. And we value the relationship. We haven't been in business for this long because, you know, it's because of the relationships. And so the launch phase is all about that final occupancy and beyond. And like, what are we doing to ensure that you are thrilled with this product? And like, what can we do for you moving forward? So that's our methodology. And, you know, I think it's such a clear roadmap of, this is exactly what you're going to see, and this is what you can expect. So then you just deliver, you know? So
yes. And who wouldn't want to do business with somebody like that, right? Like, that knows exactly what's going on from the start. They know it's going to be consistent communication, and there's no surprises. I mean, I wish everything I bought had that to go along with it, right? Like, no matter what it is, a contractor, you know, buying a new car, buying a new house, like all those things. So, Lydia, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, this information that you've shared today is going to help so many of our listeners. Just the nuggets, like everything you had to say were just nuggets of wisdom that I hope that they can put into place right away. So thanks again for sharing your journey with us. What strikes me the most about your story is that you're not just participating in the construction industry, you're actually re-engineering it for the next generation. For those of you that are listening, remember that your past chapters, whether in the military or in a family business, are the foundation for your next move. Thank you again for joining us on Women Talk Construction. And thank you, Lydia, for spending your time with us and pouring into our listening audience.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate it. And please, anyone, feel free to DM me on Instagram. Okay, Lydia Miller Co. Have a great day. Thank you.
Awesome, Lydia. I forgot to ask that. If anybody needs to get a hold of Lydia, if she, all right, let me start that again. We'll cut that out. If anyone on the listening audience would like to get a hold of Lydia, she is on Instagram, and please reach out to her if you need to do business with her in Virginia. If you need some advice on how to run your business, it sounds like she's got a great foundation. And thank you again for listening.